Jordan Peterson is a very controversial character for more than just the reasons that social justice warriors have reasons to lie about him and call him alt-right, or reasons why dishonest people like Kathy Newman would ask him ridiculous gotcha questions. It's partly more due to the kind of people who are on the same quote-unquote side of the quote-unquote culture war as Peterson, but really don't like Jordan Peterson, but for entirely different reasons. Oftentimes, encountering Jordan Peterson fans can be a huge turnoff before you ever encounter the guy, and only encountering the guy through interviews, even interviews that are non-hostile, like seeing him on the Joe Rogan Experience, can produce a very negative opinion of the man, because you're still seeing very condensed and shortened versions of his arguments and small snippets of his philosophy. And I've been told that a lot of people are very unimpressed by reading his books, and oftentimes when they say why that is, I start to worry that Jordan Peterson is not very good at communicating himself in the written format, because they're still interpreting things from him that I just haven't. And it really confuses me. But when I see people who really don't like him, you hear the same words: lobster, bucko, clean your room, Kermit the Frog here, all that shit over and over again, and you just go, have you actually ever listened to this man? Now, the good analogy for the problem I'm having here is to take my interpretation of a certain controversial YouTube person in the skeptosphere, the smaller subculture that I'm basically in. You gotta take a guy who is so bucolic and mean and judgmental that he makes a bucolic, mean, judgmental asshole like me cringe. And you take his fans who yell about him like he's a rock star instead of an intellectual or something like that. Whatever word doesn't raise your hackles if you don't like intellectual or skeptic. And I always say, well, Harmful Opinions sort of persona to people who don't know him very well, people like me who've seen maybe 5 of his short videos, say, he hates skeptics and he is one. What a hypocrite. He does things that he condemns other people for doing. What a hypocrite. And his fans are cringy assholes who only look to just fuck with people and troll and just be a dick rather than say anything of worth or have any argument worth having. Therefore, I think that Harmful Opinions is a worthless piece of shit, and I don't understand why he's popular. The problem is, if I go and I sit down and I watch a Harmful Opinions from start to finish, the likelihood that I like the video and agree with everything Harmful Opinions says is more than 90%. It's probably really close to 100%. So why the disconnect? Why do I hate him when I'm extremely likely, not just more likely, extremely likely to agree with him and his point? This is the pitfalls of communicating and the pitfalls of dealing with a cultural war, where you're expressing ideas that are not binary in any way, aren't formed and aren't describing something that's binary, and yet you're forced to communicate those into a binary, into a culture war where there's 2 opposing sides. And you find that the Jordan Peterson fans won't like if you heavily criticize his methods but still generally agree with him, and they definitely won't like you at all if you hate Jordan Peterson and call him a retard. Take, for instance, one of the major pitfalls in dealing with Jordan Peterson from the sphere that I am in, the sort of atheistic skeptosphere. Well, Jordan Peterson bases a lot of his arguments off of the Bible. Jordan Peterson also has the problem of believing in objective morality, something that I disagree strongly with Jordan Peterson with. However, since I should have mentioned this before, that I've watched literally dozens of hours, entire lecture series, 3-hour-long talks with the Q&As afterwards of Jordan Peterson. I've spent a huge amount of time listening to this man in the background as I play video games or do chores around the house or drive in the car. I don't understand why belief in God or use of the Bible as an allegory for moral lessons is any particular condemnation of Peterson whatsoever. However, all these atheists hear this little snippet of an interview. Again, problems with snippets and interviews in condensed form arguments, where an interviewer straight out asks Jordan Peterson, "Do you believe in God?" And Jordan refuses to answer the question. The atheist immediately recoils from this. Just say yes. Just say yes, Jordan, because you do believe in God. But what did Jordan Peterson say? "I don't want to say yes because I don't like that question." To which the interviewer asks, "Why don't you like that question?" He says, "Because it's an attempt to box me in, and I don't have any intention of being boxed in. I don't want to be boxed in." Why is the atheist recoiling from Jordan Peterson refusing to answer the question? Because the intention of the atheist watching this and recoiling is to box him in, to immediately disregard everything he says from thenceforth. And any time he mentions Bible or the story of Jonah and the whale or any of the other shit that he uses to describe his actual philosophy and his self-help stuff, another thing that people recoil about. But basically, Jordan Peterson isn't preaching a worldview, he's preaching a lifestyle. And not even necessarily a lifestyle, but a mode of thinking, with the intention to produce a person who betters themselves. All again, sounding pretty cringy to people who are automatically distrustful of self-help people and motivational speakers and all that bullshit, and especially anyone who takes a tack to the religious when doing it. And they just recoil. They go, "Oh, he said God. He believes in objective morality. I will listen to nothing he says from henceforth." Just like when I hear Harmful Opinion say something that I find hypocritical, all of a sudden I think the guy's entirely not worth listening to. And the other problem is his fans. These lobster memes are not doing Peterson any good. None of this clean your room bucko shit is really communicating to anybody outside of Jordan Peterson's own, very close, very loyal fans. It's an example where memes do not help you. A lot of people always think meme crusades are always good for you. No, they're not. Meme crusades only really help if you're just directly dealing with somebody who's a concrete entity who's very clearly evil. Then a meme crusade is helping you. If a meme crusade against Scientology is pretty clear cut, a meme crusade against Hillary Clinton's candidacy for president is a good example of a meme crusade. Jordan Peterson meme crusading over the in behalf and against an imbalance of good and evil, and an imbalance of order and chaos, and a meme crusade on behalf of the proper balance and the proper means for right living, all of a sudden it's not working. You can tell just from me describing it that it doesn't make any sense. And so what you're looking at is a bunch of Jordan Peterson fans who sound like the cringy and most unfortunate and autistic Rick and Morty fans, and it sounds like they're spouting the memes about you need a pretty high IQ to understand this show. Meanwhile, Rick and Morty is a very good show, and it's a very smart show, and part of the problem is it's not inaccessible to stupid people at all. There's sort of a layered meme, and underneath is a theme, and even underneath that is an emotional moral lesson that's always being taught, when it looks like in the macro scale as a very nihilistic and directionless show, when if you actually pay attention, the show is actually saying something. And a lot of people just hear Pickle Rick and move on. And I understand why. The thing is, the show is better than Pickle Rick. The show is more than Pickle Rick. And the show is very often a lot smarter than the fans give it credit for, let alone the detractors. But how do you communicate that when using the word smart automatically provokes a response of high IQ? That's part of the problem with this. See, Jordan Peterson talks extensively, when he says and the antidote for chaos. People see that and go, well, chaos can often be a good thing. And they go, well, fuck Jordan Peterson. He's a straight-laced, suit and tie, normie douche trying to tell me how to live my life. I'm going to recoil from that. When probably I would say, in the dozens of hours of Jordan Peterson content I have watched, the amount of time he spends criticizing order and warning against the toxic nature, the stagnating nature, the eventual evil that comes from oppressive order is probably 3/4 of what the man talks about. The man argues against order about 3 times as much as he orders against chaos, and usually what he's doing desperately to describe and using hero myths, everything from the Lion King to the Iliad, as well as the Bible, which is chock fucking full of allegories and hero myths and moral lessons, in order to describe a proper interpretive structure. Something that is unfortunately left up to subjective interpretation again, which automatically pisses off a lot of concrete scientific people who want a clear answer that is perfectly demonstrable. And this produces this angle where there's skeptics, scientists, smart people, retards, malicious, authoritarian, toxic order assholes like social justice warriors, as well as overly chaotic, directionless, aimless, ineffective meme lords. And you just produce a guy that everybody is listening to and paying attention, but very few people just like him outright. And that is why it's so fucking difficult to try to say anything about morality or philosophy or what produces a productive person who's constantly bettering themselves. This whole conversation seems very not worth having for everybody involved because everybody is scared of the subjective nature of it. Everyone's scared of the relative nature of it, of the need for debate and discussion and confrontation in order to sort the situation out, bucko. Therefore, I think that even at the subconscious, animalistic level, everybody is afraid of this man because he's producing a form of conversation that people are afraid of, let alone a actual concrete dichotomy that people are afraid of. In fact, the fact that Jordan Peterson rejects binary arguments, usually because they're not at all relevant to what he is saying, further just causes recoil. Everybody's hackles are up. Everybody's arching like a freaked out cat. Meanwhile, if you sit down and listen to him, the likelihood that you'll disagree with him is extremely low, even if you're a social justice warrior, even if you're an atheist, even if you're an ultra-religious fundamentalist, even if you're an old adult or a young teenager in high school. See, what Jordan Peterson is basically attempting to describe is what is a healthy person and what is a healthy society. And you'll find that the reason why Jordan Peterson is very, very popular is because there's a very, very large amount of people who come from very, very different walks of life. It's a complete fucking myth that the only people who care about him are white people between the ages of 15 and 25. It's a fucking lie. The reason why tons of people from different religions, faiths, races, age groups, economic brackets listen to him is because all he's describing is what is healthy, what is not healthy, and how do we become healthier. And a lot of people think that his means, methods, and reasoning and conclusions in the pursuit of that question are worth listening to. And that's why a lot of people have said, and they're not lying to you, Jordan Peterson changed my life. I don't necessarily think I'm one of those people, and I'm definitely not one of his fans. And in fact, the thread that goes between all the problems I've just described to you is very often fans, very often memes, gross oversimplifications. When if you actually sit down and take the time to listen, you realize that he's awesome. And you're not going to agree with everything he says. And in fact, if you do agree with everything Jordan Peterson says at all times, there's very likely something wrong with you. And the interesting thing about him is he would probably tell you that himself. That if you agree with him all the time, even though he very clearly thinks he is right, as all people should think they are right, or if you don't have the conviction of your arguments, why are you having it? He would say if you agree with him 100% of the time, there's very likely something wrong with you. because it's true. So think about that the next time you have a conversation about him or listen to a conversation about him. Thanks for watching.